Greetings, ladies and metal and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. I've recently added affiliate links down below for all the equipment I use, so if you're in need of some of that equipment and you like to click the link, I'll earn a little bit of a percentage from the sale, if there is any. Anyways, on to the story. The Purpose of Soldiers, written by Alyksandur. Sven looked around the desperate group already gathered in the room. Honestly, he was rather surprised just how many GCC races were represented. Some representatives from the Orion Tetrad were, of course, parents like himself, Magavs, Vustari, and Mirians. But not many, since they already knew everything he was going to be discussing. A few Istna off to one side, a surprisingly sizable contingent from the assaulted races comprising the Imperial Associates, the Lebic Fennel Drain. A Zind, who took up most of the war beside the Istrana. An entire table covered in ingenuity. A couple Marais, to his delight. Even a Rizk, who hadn't retreated to Vok with the rest of his race, or at least Sven thought it was his. But it had been hard to distinguish the Revocat genders when they were common sight before the race withdrew from the GCC. According to most GCC members he talked to. Plenty of small contingents of other races too, but the Tetrad was still new enough members of the GCC that he hadn't recognized all of them. Still, barely a quarter of the GCC was represented. It was disheartening, to say the least, but it was better a turnout than Sven and his superiors had suspected. True, roughly a quarter of the GCC did not maintain any sort of military presence, relying on allies for protection when needed. But the fact that the Marais, who very definitely fell into that category themselves, had deigned to show up was going to reflect poorly on other such races. Also, somewhat tellingly, the Patagoi were conspicuously absent. While they weren't currently at war with Earth, he had expected a representative to relay some sort of information about Terran tactics for when hostilities inevitably broke out again. Most in the room were in their respective races' versions of standard-issue combat uniform, though he noted a few were in civilian clothing and a few others in full-dress uniform. He was in full-dress uniform himself, though he would have been much more comfortable in his BDU. One of the Magavs noticed Sven and had entered. "At ease," he barked, in a distinctively Magavish, dual-voiced roar. "As you were," Sergeant Matheson said before nearly anyone had even processed what Magav had said. Sven walked up to the podium. He consciously had to avoid marching. This was supposed to be a more informal seminar, after all, and pulled out a datapad with a list of bullet points he was supposed to touch on. There was no carefully prepared speech. He was supposed to read the room and adjust his behavior accordingly. Fortunately, the Magav had done an excellent job of getting everybody's attention, so he didn't need to wait for the room to quiet down. He had the attention ready. "Welcome to Waypoint Fitzsimmons. I'm Sergeant Sven Matheson. Sergeant, yes. For those unfamiliar with Terran military, that means don't call me sir. I work for a living," he began, and a ripple of dry chuckles that ran through the room was enough to tell him that at least most of the soldiers present were from cultures where officers might have been obeyed, but not revered. So far, so good, he thought to himself. "I know that we have the hall booked for an entire hour, but I'm going to be honest with you. We probably won't need that long. And I'm not going to go out of my way to drag things out on what's supposed to be a day off for most of you." "Thank you, Sergeant," one of the two Marais called out. "It's supposed to be a day off for me too, so it's not like I'm without the ulterior motive," Sven said wryly, getting another round of assorted amused noises. He sobered and looked at his datapad before really getting started. "I want to keep this generally informal, with all of the different militaries represented here. It's easier than trying to keep up with all the protocols of all of them. We do, after all, only have an hour," he said, that without any attempt at humor. And while he got a few smiles or snickers, everybody knew he wasn't making a joke. "Before we get on to the topic of the Zothran Accord, I'm given to believe that you all have some connection to your respective military forces' strategic or tactical department," Sven asked. There was a general murmur of confirmation. "I'm also given to believe that all of you are low in rank." More confirmation. "Oh, good. Someone actually listened for once," he said. "As mentioned, I'm a sergeant. I'm not an officer. An officer did arrange the seminar, yes, but he asked for ideas before doing so. 2 of those ideas were to have it be attended by low-ranking soldiers, and presented by an only slightly less low-ranking soldier. Anyone care to make a guess as to why?" Permission to speak, Sergeant, said one of the Ishna through their voice synthesizer. Permission granted. What you got? Arranging for higher-ranking officers to be free of their duties to attend would have been problematic, they suggested. Partially very good, Sven said. Sergeant, one of the diminutive thieves, his squeaky voice carrying surprisingly well. Go ahead. Low-ranking soldiers usually have less experience with strategy or tactics, so they're more open to ideas that might be too radical for officers to consider. Also correct, Sven said approvingly. As for me being the one to presenting the seminar, that's mostly because, at least in the Tetrad, there's frequently a disconnect between soldiers and officers. Their thought was that someone closer in rank to you would make the whole process easier. He gave them a moment to discuss that amongst themselves before raising a hand and clearing his throat to get their attention again. Sergeant, we would speak, the Zin said through her own voice synthesizer before Sven could begin. Do so, he invited. We questioned the wisdom of trusting the seminar to our lowly soldiers. Their superiors may refuse to pay heed to the words they return with, she said. I'm glad someone else was thinking that, the Vasturi chimed in, and there were a few assenting grumbles through the assembly. My suggestion to all of you would be to remind your superiors that this seminar is being presented by the Terrans, and then ask your superiors how well Earth has done against the Zothranes compared to your old race. The McGarvish voices from when he first entered the room spoke up. Sven looked at Zind while pointing at the McGarv. What he said, he said. There was a brief pause, no doubt while Zind was communicating with the Overhive, and then she answered, We like this answer and concede its validity. Proceed. I know this is supposed to be a seminar on our tactics and strategies, but quite frankly, my immediate superiors and I think the problems you've had in trying to fight the Zothrans go a lot deeper than that. You suggest we know not how to fight? Spat one of the Imperial associates, his pincers clicking in outrage. I suggest nothing of the sort, Sven countered. The Tetrad and the IA have had a few run-ins, and you give as good as you get. You've held your own against the Xyz pretty well, too, if memory serves. If his carapace pattern was anything to go by, that placed he's the Imperial associate. Anyone else want to take offense? None did, or at least not vocally. He wasn't sure about the risk, but knew he wasn't going to say a damn thing over the risk conflict. Okay, I said I wasn't questioning your ability to fight. I will, however, question your ability to make war. Anyone who's seen us in action will probably know what I mean by that. Let me ask you all something, he said, that last sentence a little louder to cover a few grumbles of those assembled. As a soldier, and if you are from the Tetrad or otherwise closely associated with any of us, don't answer this. As a soldier, what is your job? In the simplest of terms. Just call out your answers, but try not to talk over one another. To fight in wars. To fight when called upon. To fight for the glory of our people and allies. To fight for the ideals of the GCC and its races. Many more similar answers rang out before he waved them to silence, and you could see the Marie in particular struggling not to laugh aloud. You think that's funny, civilian? Sven asked with a faint smirk, pointing to the Marie. It kinder is, Sergeant Matheson, she answered, her crest and facial features quivering in barely controlled amusement. Well, you're right, it kinder is, because the Xyz have been making us a laughingstock of most of the GCC, and a lot of it boils down to, in no small part, the fact that you all are wrong, Sven said, the amused expression hardening into a stern glare that swept the room. How many of you do not think your job is to fight? Raise a hand, or other manipulator extremity. There weren't many, the Tetrad, the Marais, the Fthi, the Ishna, and one lone member of the Imperial Associates, whom Sven was not surprised to note was the one who had spoken out earlier, and a few scattered throughout the crowd. Keep him up until I tell you to put him down, Sven instructed. You, Sven said, pointing to the vaguely crab-like Imperial Associate. What is your job as a soldier? To kill the enemy, he said confidently. Sven frowned slightly. Still not the right answer, but better than just fighting. Anyone with that answer, hand down. Most of the non-Tetrad and non-Tetrad-associated extremities went down, including the risks. Okay, curiosity compels me. How well have you done against the Zothrans? Far better than the GCC average, the Imperial Associate said, with a thin chorus of agreements coming from the few individuals around the room. You, Sven said, again, pointing to a race they didn't recognize, and would have a hard time even accurately describing. What is your job as a soldier? To win wars, was the answer. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Hand down if that was your answer. A few more went down, though notably not any of the Tetrad or Fenecti. Also notable was that the only other hand still up was the Isna. You're still wrong, Sven said flatly, and this time there was an angry muttering through everyone whose hands or extremities weren't still raised. Sven smirked thinly. But you are very close and have the right general mindset. I'm betting you do well against the Zothrans. Only the Orion Tetrads passes us in success on the Zothran front, was said proudly. Nice, Sven grinned, then gestured to the Ichna. I have a feeling you know the answer, he said. Prove me right. As a soldier, my job is to make certain the other side does not complete their objectives, they said in their synthesized voice. Sven snapped his fingers and bobbed his wrist in a couple times while pointing at the Ishna. A bit wordy, but that's the answer I wanted. Hands down, everyone, your job as a soldier. Make sure the other side doesn't win. Is this all related to the territorial reputation of not fighting wars according to GCC traditions? Asked one of the soldiers, but he couldn't tell which one. Tangentially, Chen said. I've heard analysis about evolutionary factors in Deathworld environments, and the sort of thing are more at play here, though. Not really relevant here, except that it is why we fared better against the Axes than any of you have. Fighting the Zothran Accord is much like fighting the Orion Tetrad. A different member of the IA spoke up. They ignore our warfare traditions and have their own, which are difficult for us to comprehend. We don't understand most of them either, if that's any consolation, Sven said. But the important thing to keep in mind is that they will laugh at the concept of a fair fight just as much as we will. How do you fight them? Asked the Zend. By your standards, by cheating, Sven said bluntly. I know the GCC traditions all revolve around fair fights and honor, but honor isn't going to save your species when a bunch of genocidal jerks think your homeworld and colonies will make great places to conquer, so they can keep you as livestock. Ask them, he said with a gesture towards them, but continued. You know all the things the Patagoi say about we fight. They're not lying. We send overwhelming forces, we jam communications, we intercept what we don't jam, we send false information, we use stealth, we snipe, we hit and run, we harass, we do logistics raids, and if we realize that we're not going to win the fight, we make damn sure their win has the hell of a price tag on it. He finished with an almost snarl. Why do you not simply surrender, asked someone of another race that he couldn't identify, or retreat? Surrender only works if the other side takes prisoners, and if they don't or just kill the prisoners they do take, then it's a non-starter, Sven explained with a flat expression. Sometimes we do have to retreat, but we rarely give anybody territory for free when we do. We'll pull down infrastructure on the way out or leave nasty little surprises for them to stumble across, ask the Patagoi. A few times we've evacuated everybody and given them a planet glass to try to colonize. That sent a murmur through the soldiers. Make sure the other side doesn't win, he reiterated. If they want a planet, don't give it to them. If you can't keep it, make sure they won't be able to use it. If you can't do that, make them expend so much in resources to use it that they won't be able to use the next planet they take from you. This sounds like nothing more than spite, a soldier scoffed. You say that now, but when they stop attacking you because they can't afford to keep attacking you, it starts to make a lot more sense. No Tetral world or protectorate has been the target of an Axie attack in 5 Terran years. About 6.5 revs, Sven corrected himself. There's no chance of our superiors implementing any strategies involving your methods, the same soldier, the Vuxnarakaravian, he thought, said, the gossamer filaments along her dorsal ridge standing nearly straight upwards. Sven smirked humorously. I can't do anything about that beyond advising you to point out that your strategies haven't worked yet. Ours have. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.